common sex questions. One was for mastering cowgirl, how to ride your husband into oblivion, how to give a lap dance, a step-by-step for wives. And then my vibrator almost destroyed my marriage. And what do you think about that one?
Oh my God. Well, I highly doubt the vibrator was responsible for the marriage crumbling.
What do you think it was?
I think it was more that the husband was not satisfying her and he got threatened probably by the vibrator. So
yeah, probably that he wasn't man enough or something and she needed this, vibrator in the relationship, or got mad that she only had an orgasm from
the vibrator. It's more incentive to watch The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. There is an entire plot point because one of them has never had an orgasm and was married.
Was married. Okay, so now I will be watching it. I appreciate you. Welcome back to Making It Awkward. I'm Jessica Wilson, dietitian and author of It's Always Been Ours. You can watch video of the show on YouTube and Spotify, and you can support the show by rating, reviewing, subscribing, commenting, and leaving an Apple Podcast review. You can find me on Instagram at jessicawilson.msrd. Making It Awkward is an independent, scrappy podcast brought to you by folks who have used a chalkboard wall to make a visual of everything that has led us up to make America healthy again, and who now get to add Womanosphere to the board. My introduction to the Womanosphere, or Womanosphere, pronunciation trademark TBD, came via The Guardian. Their article titled, "Now Comes the Womanosphere, the anti-feminist media telling women to be thin, fertile, and Republican," definitely caught my eye. We know that the manosphere played a huge role in the last US presidential election and gave us Make America Healthy Again. And I want to dig into the Womanosphere to be ready for what's to come. I had two people I wanted to talk to about this, so I decided to do 2 episodes. Today's interview is with Cecily Nelson-Alford, a scholar of feminism and gender. She and I talk about Evie Magazine and the content she's seen on social media lately. Cecily's a mom, and she talks about what in the Womanosphere speaks to her and why the language used by conservatives can appeal to many moms. She talks about how value is attached to womanhood and society, and she connects it all with a discussion of the Overton window. And with that, here's Cecily. Cecily, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jessica.
Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, I can do that. I'm Cecily Nelson-Alford, she, her, they pronouns. I'm the director of the Women's Resources and Research Center at UC Davis. And I've been doing gender equity work for probably about 15 or so years now in centers across California, across the UC, CSU system. And I'm a mom. I have 2 kids, and I was a student parent, had my oldest daughter when I was an undergrad. So that's a big part of my experience. I am queer, I am Black, biracial, and we can cut it there.
That's great. All right. I sent you only 3 articles and you came back with 10 or 20 things that caught your eye about them, which is why I had you on. Yeah. Let's start with maybe one thing that stuck out to you about the Womanosphere.
Yeah. Woo. The Womanosphere. Yeah. So, well, Jessica, you and I, we talked a little bit about how our algorithms are now going to be ruined forever. Mm-hmm. I think the most striking thing that first comes up for me is that some of the videos, I actually felt like I was resonating with the points they were making. Mm-hmm. So there was one I mentioned to you where they were talking about the 2 income trap, which was a book. And it was a young woman saying how basically, women were taught that what freedom and liberation and progress looked like was working outside of the home. Mm-hmm. And we got that. And now women are overworked and tired and stressed, especially moms, which as a working mom, totally get it. My kids are older now, but definitely resonate with that struggle. But then it was just interesting because then immediately after that, so I was finding myself just kind of resonating, and they had imagery of a mom just like pulling her hair out in the car. And then she started talking about how feminism lied to us. And I was like, oh, that's the gotcha. But I was struck by how, like, maybe if I were in a different mindset, if I didn't have some of the knowledge and backing or experiences I had, how I could be sucked into that, or, you know, people I know could.
Totally. Can you speak to the choice part of feminism? That was new for me.
Oh, yeah. So I think one of the things they were really able to capitalize on to co-opt feminism is this idea of choice feminism. So choice feminism is, you know, used to describe the idea that feminism's primary goal is for women to have choice. So whether that is the choice whether or not to have children, the choice to work outside of the home or not, whatever that may be, which isn't all bad, but unfortunately in recent years, feminism has been whittled down to be only that. And because we're now in a position where women working outside of the home is normalized, and again, two-parent working homes are normalized, this person on the video was kind of using the rhetoric of that choice to stay home has been removed from us. And feminism contributed to taking that away, but we should be, like, women should be working to a place where that is a choice that's available. So it's really interesting because, again, that could speak to somebody in a different way than saying women must be home. Yeah. And then I think it also relies really heavily on right now where we are, this kind of, there's a lot of satirical, like, internalized misogyny. We were talking a little bit about Sabrina Carpenter and her album cover. That's hopefully we can add an image or something to the episode page. And then there's also just kind of this, like, I'm just a girl, or like I'm literally just a girl dinner, girl math. And I love it. Like I have a weekly girl dinner night where I'm like, we're just going to figure it. It's a fruit plate. I don't know. But it's interesting because I think that I could see if you were surrounded by that, let's say from 11 and up, I'm literally just a girl. I don't want to do math. I don't want to do hard things. And then you see someone saying you've been tricked thinking you have to work. You can actually stay home. Someone can provide for you. You can live this life and be around your kid, and you don't have to hurt your pretty little head. I mean, I could see, you know, some of the appeal of that.
Yeah. Can you say more about Sabrina Carpenter's album cover and the satirical portion of that?
Yeah. Oh, Sabrina. So for those who I'll do my best to describe it, but I mean, she's basically on all fours and holding on to, I think, kind of reaching up for the man, like in a pretty, you know, a position resembling a dog or begging. And I believe it's called Man's Best Friend as well, is the name of the album or the single that's associated with it. So she's kind of got herself in the position of a dog. And I think in listening to her music, you know, I'm a Sabrina fan. I've listened to her previous album, but I think because she's so conventionally attractive, conventionally like typical feminine white woman, and even though her songs are oftentimes poking fun at men, like she's still very much meets, you know, fulfills the male gaze. Like there was nothing about it that really felt, you know, like it was turning anything on its head.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Which I'm all for women getting to own their sexuality, and we don't always have to, you know, not everything has to be a message, but I just think it feels like folks are working really hard to kind of create a message after the fact. And it just, to me, doesn't read that way, especially given where we are right now, to see just a white woman on her hands and knees in lingerie, like looking up at a man adoringly. It just wasn't, I don't think it hit the way. But I also don't necessarily look to folks like Sabrina Carpenter to save us either, right? So it's kind of a challenge of, you know, how do we hold folks accountable for recognizing that they have a platform, but also knowing that, you know, they're on the stage because they're singers, not because they're activists.
Yes. You mentioned the connection to ads and pinup ads that I hadn't made. I love that.
Yeah. So definitely to me, when I looked at the image of her, it looked like either kind of like a pinup calendar from the 50s or those old ads for those who, I mean, I studied multicultural and gender studies in undergrad. So we would sometimes look at like old magazines and things, you know, to have develop that media literacy. And, you know, they would have a man with his wife bent over his knee smacking her. And so it just kind of reminded me of that. And it would be like, I think there was one that was really popular where it was a shirt with an iron print on it. And then there was something in the text that basically implied that she would be beaten. And it's like, don't want to be hit. Like, get this new iron.
Okay.
So I don't know. It just something about her, the imagery reminded me a little bit of that, like punishing or, you know, putting the wife in her place. That was so prevalent, especially for white suburbia.
Yeah.
In the 50s and 60s.
You said suburbia, and something that I had not put together here. Like, I hadn't associated Womanosphere or even Manosphere with suburbia. So I really appreciate this. Where do you think the trad wives, the Make America Healthy Again moms, are they living in suburbia, or where are they supposed to be living?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one thing that's interesting is with the Womanosphere, it feels like conservative folks have almost found a way to find a niche for everyone, because so we have the homesteading, the more rural, the ballerina farm, which we talked a little bit about, you know, that farm and this young woman who had gone to Juilliard and gotten pregnant and is now, I think, has like, what, 6 kids?
17.
7. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's kind of like a base for that. And then there is a little bit more suburban. I didn't mention this earlier, but I just finished watching The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Nice.
And while a lot of what they're trying to do is they're saying they're breaking boundaries, but there is still a little bit of a glamorizing their experience in the church. They have the whole saints and sinners thing where some of them are adhere more strictly to the church while others are a little looser. But they're all, you know, they have filler and Stanley cups and beautiful suburban large homes. And so that's interesting because you kind of have that vibe as well. But then with the Womanosphere, I think we're also able to get some maybe young single women who could be living in cities or who are living their lives, who are like, I'm gravitating to someone like Brett Cooper or the Evie magazine, you know, because it just seems like, you know, timeless outfits to wear, you know, where to meet the one.
Yes. The floor to ceiling windows, the marble countertops, the things that I would not see in suburbia. Well, maybe the marble countertops, but definitely not these floor to ceiling windows and all of these like cute cutout spaces. Yeah. So that is city. So we have farm, we have cityscape, we have suburban life. So really they're everywhere. Like you said, speaking to everyone. Wow. And aesthetics, you were telling me the hat of the season, which I'm now obsessed with.
Yes, I can't wait for mine to come in. No. I was scrolling TikTok recently and luckily, I mean, it was a stitch. So whenever I see something a little alarming, it usually ends up being a stitch. But yeah, there was a Southern boutique and I'll make sure we have the name for the end, but I think it was Fox and Hen Boutique. They were selling these bonnets that really are in the shape of, they were very much Little House on the Prairie, Handmaid's Tale. And so, folks were joking in the comments as people do on TikTok, about, like they're preparing us for Gilead. But it was really interesting to see them saying this is the hat of the season. And there were folks in the comments who were excited.
Yeah.
And they were young women, so it's interesting, this kind of movement toward conservatism that's like when we start to see it in fashion, that's definitely, what we're wearing is always an indicator of what is happening politically and historically always has been, right? What we choose to see in theaters, what we choose to eat, like all of those things are political.
Indeed they are. You mentioned the destroyed algorithm on TikTok, and one of my favorite things that you had said is the like slow breakfast situation. What were you seeing in that portion of TikTok?
Yeah, so definitely was seeing, like, is it kind of a glamorizing of this trad wife lifestyle? And I think Nara Smith,
yes,
is a good example of that. She's a Black biracial woman and a Mormon, and she posts, herself making really elaborate meals for her husband and children. And again, this is where there is that tricky overlap, because it's not inherently bad to have this kind of return. I mean, a lot of us really enjoyed watching With Love from Megan.
Yeah. Oh,
which is
that's
very,
a good connection.
Which is very kind of giving trad wife. I mean, and the going out and getting the berries, and but also really desirable for a lot of us right now who are overwhelmed, who are increasingly, our food is, the percentages of our food, like it becomes less and less food. So yeah.
Megan had the picking berries, the putting together a garden party, the baking donuts, and all of that business in a giant home that was not hers, which was an interesting take. Anyhow, what are the intersections with her life and trad wives and other things for you?
I mean, I think the intersection is because so much of the trad wife content overlaps with this kind of homesteading, living off the land, really slow and intentional living. I think that's where, for me, it overlaps with, just creating these simple luxuries, really finding joy and like caring for and doing things for the people around you. And so I think that's where there's often overlap. So it's interesting. I mean, I think that, a difference oftentimes is a lot of queer folks, or a lot of folks of color, or people who are approaching homesteading or, gardening, like really living off the land from a more radical standpoint, are usually doing it to affect change, or because there's like an ethical, moral dilemma with how we're living. Whereas I think sometimes folks, where it's not as much a political statement, it's more around, I don't want crap in my family's bodies, or like, I want my autonomy. I think autonomy is a very interesting, I know a lot of us saw that connection with, my body, my choice, with the masks during COVID.
Right.
So yeah, I think the priority is autonomy and self, and like immediate circle, nuclear family for the right, and then community and like the greater good for the left.
Yeah. I loved the slow and intentional living. I mean, I would hear that both in Republican circles, but also in like queer communities. 1,000. Yeah. 1,000%. And all the like retreaty things that folks of color, queer folks go on, with this really therapy language of like, we just want to slow down and be intentional. But 1,000%, let's stay home and have this slow breakfast and be intentional about how we raise our children. Huh. Fascinating. Yes. And make our own food and not rely on one, capitalistic structures, but also two, the people who are going to poison us at the grocery store, or whatever it is.
Right.
Something I'll have to think about. What else stuck out to you as a feminist scholar? The things that I would for sure miss about all this?
So one of the things that I noticed was, I mean, obviously just the role of beauty in who gets elevated and who gets listened to. There is a semi-popular influencer named Pearl Davis, who is a very conservative woman. She's kind of like a female answer to an Andrew Tate, but she hasn't really amassed the following of some of these Womanosphere, like Brett Cooper, some of these folks, you know. She's very homely. And oftentimes, I mean, the comments that I usually see, because most of when she goes on these podcasts, most of what she's talking about is high value men, what high value men want, and why women need to submit to men and, you know, understand that, you know, if we do certain things, we diminish our value. But most of the comments and responses to her are very much like, you don't even have a man, and also, woof, you're ugly. And so, but it's interesting because I don't feel like people dismiss maybe some of the young, beautiful, conservative influencers in the same way, who do have husbands, boyfriends, fiancés, who again are conventionally attractive, who look more like a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader than they do, you know, like, you know, somebody from Little House on the Prairie. So, I think that's interesting to see, you know, how aspirational content on social media is really, really powerful. But it can be really destructive because it's so highly curated. I've had to be very intentional about unfollowing certain aspirational content that just made me feel like I was always striving, you know, and so it's very easy though to get sucked into that.
Yeah, the overlap, the connection, right? You go from manifesting to aspirational to all of a sudden you, don't want a job and you want 10 children.
Right.
Is that how it works? Is that the pipeline? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the like female answer to Andrew Tate for sure, because I'd heard that and read that, but I hadn't like put it together until you said it. So that was super helpful. And because I had heard answer, and it really is like her saying the exact same things. Like she's kind of like answering that call of what he is saying. She's not providing anything new. Cause I was thinking like, oh, how is this conservative person like answering his concerns? But no, that's not at all. You totally made me reflect on that.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. I do think she's really just kind of parroting back to these men. But unfortunately, I think what she and a lot of these other women provide is legitimacy, because when men are saying something, it lands one way. But when men and women are saying something to women, it lands another way. But again, I do think that it carries more weight with young women when the advice or the opinions are coming from women who they actually want to be like. And I think that's where Pearl has kind of missed the mark, is she's not aspirational for a lot of young women.
Because she's not attractive? Because
she's not attractive, and because she, I want to say, was in her early 30s and was still single. And so she, you know,
sure.
Me just
great news. I love this. All of this is great news. It's going really well.
She ugly. Like
that's what they say on the TikToks.
They do.
Nice. So one of the terms that I saw was Cuteservatives, which I think plays 100% into that 20-something-year-olds, not the older ladies.
Yeah, that was really interesting. I mean, it feels almost like how fandoms come about, you know, like Ariana Grande fans are Arianators, or, you know, the Beehive, or, you know, Mariah Carey's Lambs. And now we have Cuteservatives.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting and kind of capitalizing on, I think, the desire to belong, but like to belong to, and I think that there's also been this leaning into like hyper femininity as well that happens with a lot of these like right wing influencers, but in a way that, like, I think Cuteservatives, I don't know, it speaks to a certain energy of like joining a sorority and that energy of really like enjoying womanhood. I don't know. I think that they appeal to that desire and to the desire to be seen as attractive and to the kind of woman that men want.
Yeah, the Evie magazine was giving like early aughts swimsuit issue, Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue with like the poses, the aesthetics, just the angles that were being used, which was interesting to me and not consistent with like a trad wife or like crunchy mom aesthetic. So, I mean, I guess it goes along with the 20 somethings, but yes, trying to be beautiful is interesting.
Yeah, that reminds me of, some of the conversation we had about the secret lives of Mormon wives, because there's so much of what they do. I mean, the intro to the show it's literally playing Unholy by Sam Smith.
Stop!
And it's them in white robes, wet, throwing their hair back, like
okay. Like,
and so
90s odd. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's very, very similar, that same vein of like hypersexualized, but then also, I am a good Mormon girl. And so it is interesting to kind of figure out like what the angle is there.
Interesting. So yeah, the hair flipping. Now, of course, I need to go watch it. That reminds me 100% of Baywatch. Like, I feel like at least one person in a red swimsuit, if not all of them, did the wet hair.
It's Mormon Baywatch. Absolutely.
Oh, I'm so excited. Something that we've talked about on here is the fertility of it all in the pronatalism movement, which I'll just call like a fringe movement, not actually a movement. And that's definitely something that has been discussed. The makers or the creators of the magazine, Evie, also made like a period tracking app that was created in partnership or sponsored by Peter Thiel, which is terrifying to people like me. Yeah. What's your connection, or what's been your study of like fertility and all this like motherhood type stuff?
Well, that's really interesting, because I think fact that I talked a little bit about choice feminism and how that has become the emphasis, but it's really interesting because that hasn't made its way for conservatives in this womanosphere to talk about the choice to have children, right? The choice is about the choice to be home, but they really center, the content very much centers that producing children, bearing children, biological children is the highest thing you can do, the highest expression of womanhood, and it's what brings you fulfillment. And so that really doesn't leave space for, anyone who doesn't want to be a mother. And and you're right to be horrified about, having, when I saw that the Evie magazine was involved in a fertility app or a period tracking app, it definitely creates the mentality of motherhood is the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate thing that a woman can do, plays into transphobia, obviously, right? Because we're now assigning value to people based on their body parts and whether or not you have a uterus and use it in the ways that you should. We just saw there was the interview with Nene Leakes and T.S. Madison. T.S. Madison is a trans woman, and Nene Leakes was basically asking T.S. if she only dated gay men.
Yeah.
And T.S. said, I'm a woman, so I don't date gay men. And Nene was like, but you have a penis.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, TS was like, well, some of them, you know, some of them want to fool with it. Some of them don't. Some of them, like, I don't lie. I don't hide it. It's just, it is what it is. And Nene said, you know, any man who is attracted to you, I don't want him.
Mm.
And there's, you know, so there's this distinction. And I think a lot of it comes from, as women, like, we are constantly fighting to find our value in society. And we've been told that it comes from what's between our legs, from how we look, and from our ability to produce children. And so that means that if you are not a mom, unfuckable, you know, whatever, you don't, you know, like, why are you here? You don't have value. So I think that attaching, even though it's not necessarily a bad thing if these women really love being mothers. But one, I do think that they glorify and they don't talk about the reality of, you know, as a person who is a mom, you know, I love my kids and it's exhausting. And I only have two. So I can only imagine some of them, and they just stay pregnant, you know, and which this could be a whole other episode, but we could talk about families who produce. I firmly believe that after a certain number of kids, you just are not able to parent, and the older children. This could, again, be another episode, but I saw a TikTok and it was a family. I think this was them announcing their like 6th or 7th child. And when they made the announcement, the 2 oldest daughters, their faces said it all. They are raising their siblings. And the girls looked to be maybe 12 and 10. And their faces were just devastated when their parents said they were having another baby. Like, we're going to be raising another child. Anyway. But yeah, so they don't talk about the realities of motherhood. And then again, when we make that the ultimate goal, that leaves no space for trans women, that leaves no space for queer women, a lot of the times, unless, again, they're in a straight presenting relationship. And then it also allows for us to continue to lose agency over our bodies. So Adriana Smith, the young Black woman who had blood clots and became unresponsive around 8 weeks pregnant in Georgia, and was declared brain dead and has been since kept on a ventilator. She just gave birth. But this is really scary. We basically, you know, we just watched, for all intents and purposes, a dead woman give birth. And a Black woman, right? And we know how historically, so they just proved that, you know, they don't necessarily even have to keep us alive or get our consent or take care of us to have us reproduce. Yeah. So again, I don't want to say, oh, somebody posting about how much they love being a mom directly caused what happened here. But there is that, you know, there's that pipeline. There's that. I didn't grow up or learn about a lot of the different kind of philosophical tools that we use to explain things, but I know I've been hearing people talk a lot about Overton's window, and it's this shifting of expectations and norms. I heard it described to talk about how we've slowly assimilated to normalizing plastic surgery. And this person had used the example of Real Housewives. And one of the women, I believe it was Real Housewives of New York, years ago had lip filler. And people were like, she looks insane. She looks like a clown. And over time now, when you're watching reality TV, 98% of the women have filler. And so we've kind of shifted and so it's like every time we shift a little bit more conservative, like we see something happen and people are not outraged enough, it shifts our idea of what is normal over, right? So the fact that we just saw the first, in my knowledge, in this way anyway, a brain dead woman give birth against, and again, against her family's wishes, right? It wasn't like there was a father or partner or something who was like, I want that. They said, we didn't necessarily want this. This is shifting our window, right? Like we're normalizing things. And it just over time, society starts to drift. So that's kind of scary. And that's what's happening is we still right now, I think we're in a place where a lot of people see what happened as horrible, but whereas it may have been, this is the most horrible thing you can imagine, right? And this is like decent society. And we've come this way.
Gotcha.
So it still falls into the like, that's horrible, but you know, I mean, I hop on, sorry, I'm just like randomly on a rant, but I hop on TikTok and I, you know, see Palestinians begging for help and having to use tools to trick the algorithm and people saying, you know, putting in buzzwords.
Yeah.
Tate McRae, Sydney Sweeney, you know, in order to, it's just so dystopian and sad, but it's unfortunately, while many of us are still outraged, it's becoming more normalized. We're not as outraged as we were. And that's kind of scary because it starts to show the shift of, or we can't sustain, you know, anger for that long. So what do we do?
Interesting. That's wild. In the returning to the early 1900s, I'm thinking about Black women, you know, used for gynecological discovery, right? And and here we are.
As soon as I saw that it was a Black woman in that position, I could not help but think back to Henrietta Lacks, to, like you said, to, you know, the role that Black women unwillingly played in developing obstetrics and gynecology as a profession. Yeah. And that hasn't really been acknowledged, that history.
Yeah. Anesthesia. Fascinating.
Well.
No, this was great. Cecily, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'll come up with a reason to have you back.
Period. Please do. I would love that.
All right. Thanks so much to Cecily for coming on the show. Next week, I continued the conversation about the Womanosphere with Lindsay Lee Wallace, and we can see if there are any lessons learned from the impacts of the manosphere that we can apply to the Womanosphere. If you have thoughts on this topic or anything else, you can email them to me at makingitawkwardpod@gmail.com. This has been Making It Awkward. I'm Jessica Wilson. You can follow me on Instagram at jessicawilson.msrd. You can buy my book, It's Always Been Ours. You can subscribe to this podcast. You can follow it. You can also join the podcast Patreon. You can rate this episode, review it. You can share it with a friend. Making It Awkward is edited and mixed by Jen Jacobs, who would never wear a Handmaid's Tale bonnet. This is all supported by the legacy of Sacramento Outboard Services, and I'm sure I forgot something, but if you listen next week, I'll be sure to put it in there.